What exactly happened inside the men's room at Minneapolis's airport back in June? An undercover police officer investigating complaints of lewd conduct arrested Idaho Senator Larry Craig. Roll call reports the senator made sexual advances from an adjoining stall. Craig later pled guilty to misdemeanor charges of disorderly conduct, but the conservative Republican now denies he was involved in any inappropriate conduct and regrets pleading guilty. It's unclear if he will seek re-election next year. Senator Craig already stepped down from Mitt Romney's presidential campaign. With more on the arrest of Senator Craig, we are joined by attorney Robin Gerber. She writes the You Be the Judge column for Reader's Digest, and Senator Craig says he just should not have done this. He should have gotten legal advice. Your thoughts?
Well, you know, it's interesting. He said he should have gotten legal advice because actually last night there was one report that said he had gotten legal advice. And after all this happened June 11th, he didn't plead guilty until August 8th. So actually, I think we may find out more about whether he did get legal advice or not. But still, Mike, if you plead guilty, you know you're pleading guilty.
Right. And the other thing is, this is not some guy who doesn't have any understanding of the law. He is a lawmaker.
Yes, after all.
Yeah.
You know, this case reminds me, and I'm sure you remember this case, in 1980 of Bob Bauman, the Maryland congressman, who was caught actually in an unfortunately named place, Man's World, on Capitol Hill, engaged with a 16-year-old in a very similar kind of thing.
It's tough to, these are things that just don't tend to go away either. Yeah. Let me talk to you about what you write. It's an interesting, I was just reading the one about the golf course. It's really kind of interesting. What she writes is You Be the Judge, where you set out a legal case and then you give us the opportunity to judge it and then you tell us how it turns out. How did you get the idea for something like this?
Well, you know, so many of us are faced with these sort of common legal problems. And the idea was to write a column that really talked about cases that any of us might find ourselves engaged in, like that one that you read in this issue about the golf course case. If you are out playing golf and get struck by lightning, could you sue the golf course and recover damages? And
the answer is yes and no, isn't it? That's the other thing that's interesting.
The answer is, in this case, actually, this man was able to, the man who got struck, because what the court said was that even though this was an act of God, and we would all say, oh, well, who could recover for that? The truth was that the golf course hadn't taken the right steps to warn golfers about lightning striking.
The thing that I really like about this is the great detail that you go into this, because I've covered a lot of court cases, and what people don't recognize when they watch one of these TV shows, that everything's wrapped up nicely in an hour, there's a lot of, everyone thinks it's all black and white, and there's so much gray, and it's so tough to kind of, a lot of times it's tough to come to a conclusion, because you look at the golf course, you see that the weather was actually pretty nice that day, they had no way of knowing, and so you see both sides as you lay out the arguments on both sides.
Well, and in this case, particularly, the man who got hit actually put up an umbrella. And one would think when the rain was coming down, he'd seen lightning probably about 15 miles away, you might not put up an umbrella. But nevertheless, the court said that the golf course should have had sirens, they should have had lightning shelters, and they didn't.
Let me ask you about cases. How do you find, because you have to find interesting, compelling cases, I would think, to put in here. How do you find them?
Yes, that's a great question. Well, first of all, the readers of Reader's Digest, of which there are about 40 million, actually have a lot of interesting cases, so they do send them in. And then I'm a lawyer. I'm actually a member of the bar here, so I do research, and I look for cases that I really think will interest people. Like the next case coming up is, can a grandmother get visitation with her grandchild if the mother doesn't want her to have visitation?
Oh, and you're not going to give away the answer. They've got to read it, right?
Well, I could let you be the judge. What do you think, Mike?
Well, my instincts would be, yeah, ought to, yeah.
Yeah. And actually, in this case, the court did say yes. But there's a lot of people who would say it should be parental rights and the parents should decide.
Well, that whole issue is so tricky anyway. I mean, you start getting into that. I mean, you talk about heated cases.
Yes, and I think this is coming up more and more. We're finding more and more grandparents who are taking responsibility with kids. So I think that's going to be an interesting one.
Do you find that your lawyer friends read this and say, oh, I can't believe that judge came up with that decision, or those kind of responses?
Yeah, well, actually, there's a lot of comments on the website from people, and they really get quite incensed, like the golf course case. People were really incensed that someone would have the nerve to sue the country club over getting hit by lightning. So yeah, I think there is a real reaction to these cases.
Well, that is a real issue, isn't it? I mean, we are a litigious society, and a lot of people say that a lot of these cases, that's why the costs are so high.
Yes, well, that's true. But still, you know, there are damages, and people have to figure out ways of getting compensated.
All right. Well, thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
It was fun.
Nice talking to you. It's the question of the day on Capitol Hill.